We got another video. My God, this is the 8th video I've made today, which I'm sure most of you don't care because we're here about different issues, but trust me, it's a lot of work. Joe Rogan recently had Renee on his show, and I got a few messages from people that the show is happening. I got to admit, I didn't watch it. I did see some clips that were important context that I think should be pointed out. But the reason why we're likely seeing a large downvote ratio on Joe's show, and I don't mean to be overly disrespectful, I actually messaged Joe about this. This woman, Renee, is the director of research at New Knowledge. For those of you that aren't familiar, while I was on both episodes of the Joe Rogan podcast, I referenced New Knowledge and their implication in a scheme to manipulate U.S. elections. It's actually I believe it's being investigated as a crime. Now, their founder, Jonathan Morgan, apparently engaged in this hoax campaign. I want to be careful not to make definitive statements. I'm going to read a story from Mashable and from the New York Times that go over this. But the reason why I think this is important, for one, a lot of people have reached out to me. Look, Joe interviews a lot of people. I don't blame him for not, if she wants to be on the show, that's fine. But I think it's a difficult job. Joe's a guy who has conversations about certain issues, and he got a lot of flack for what happened in the first Jack Dorsey interview, which is why I went on the show next. And then I went on the show again with Jack. But now we have this woman from New Knowledge, and I mean this in no way to be disrespectful to Joe, but I also want to make sure everybody who's watched this takes into consideration who this woman is and why I would take everything she's saying. I believe she has zero credibility. Okay, I don't know her. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to her personally, but she is implicated in the scheme as well, according to the New York Times. Apparently, Jonathan Morgan called her on the phone and asked her for suggestions, to which she gave them, and then later joined the company. Okay, there's a bunch of reasons why Joe's episode with her is around, 45% thumbs down. Some people have accurately pointed out she works for New Knowledge, a company that smeared Republicans using fake tactics, according to the New York Times. But there's also people who I see are commenting that she is like a lefty or whatever. And that's irrelevant. That's totally irrelevant. The first thing I want to point out is her LinkedIn, just to give you, show you evidence. She is the director of research for New Knowledge as of February 2018 until the present for 1 year and 2 months. She was also on the she was a term member for the Council on Foreign Relations, a fellow at Mozilla. She currently is a fellow at Mozilla, and she currently is with the Council on Foreign Relations. And in January, she joined the Truman National Security Project. She's a national security fellow. We have this story from the New York Times. I've covered it several times. You can see I was searching for her name. Secret experiment in Alabama Senate race imitated Russian tactics. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that in the podcast with Joe Rogan, Joe mentions, he mentions the point that even though some of these Russian tactic campaigns were small, even a small, campaign will have a big influence because it could change the conversation. Thus, the reason I bring this up is that the New York Times says the secret project was likely too small to have a significant effect on the race. That is an opinion. Not even an expert opinion, New York Times, Scott Shane, and Alan Blinder. You don't know what will or won't have an effect on the race. If you have evidence that they engaged in this kind of hoax campaign, that's all you should be saying. It appears as though they're trying to downplay the severity of Democratic tech experts launching a deceptive tactic that ultimately resulted in Jonathan Morgan being banned from Facebook. And we have in this story that, Senator Doug Jones, who was victorious over Roy Moore in the election, has called for the federal government to investigate. Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall is looking into whether the disinformation campaign violated the state's campaign laws. This is the woman that went on Joe Rogan's podcast. A woman that, according to the New York Times, let's just jump down and try and find this particular point. The Alabama project got started as Democrats were coming to grips with the Russians' weaponizing of social media to undermine the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton and promote Donald J. Trump. Mr. Morgan reached out at the time to Renee who would later join New Knowledge and was lead author on the report on Russian social media operations released last week. I know there were people who believed the Democrats needed to fight fire with fire, Ms. DiResta said, adding that she disagreed. It was absolutely chatter going around the party. But she said Mr. Morgan simply asked her for suggestions of online tactics worth testing. My understanding was that they were going to investigate to what extent they could grow audiences for Facebook pages using sensational news. Mr. Morgan confirmed the project created a generic page to draw conservative Alabamians. He said he couldn't remember its name and that Mac Watson, one of multiple write-in candidates, contacted the page, but we didn't do anything on his behalf. Okay. Misty Resta got on the phone with him and he asked for her suggestions. It doesn't necessarily state that she gave any suggestions. She goes on to say that she understood they were trying to grow audiences using sensational news. Sensational news was then also called fake news by other outlets when news broke of what was actually happening. Here from Mashable, we can see LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman accidentally funded fake news when he was involved in the secret experiment that utilized fake news in the Alabama Senate race to pit Democrat Doug Jones against Republican Roy Moore in December. You may say, Tim, she wasn't involved. She didn't join until 2018, which was several months after this race. Mr. Morgan, Jonathan Morgan, called her on the phone. He asked for suggestions. She may or may not have given him any, but she later joined his company. At a certain point, maybe the people who worked there would have learned of what this company was doing. According to the New York Times, let's see, they actually have, let me try and find this, because I believe it says they have documents. No, let's try reports. There we go. An internal report on the Alabama effort obtained by the New York Times says explicitly that it experimented with many of the tactics now understood to have influenced the 2016 elections. The project's operators created a Facebook page on which they posed as conservative Alabamians, using it to try to divide Republicans and even to endorse a write-in candidate to draw votes from Mr. Moore. It involved a scheme to link the Moore campaign to thousands of Russian accounts that suddenly began following the Republican candidate on Twitter, a development that drew national media attention. Here's a quote. We orchestrated an elaborate false flag operation that planted the idea that the Moore campaign was amplified on social media by a Russian botnet, the report says. Mr. Morgan said in an interview that the Russian botnet ruse does not ring a bell, adding that others had worked on the effort and had written the report. Yet, at the time of this campaign, Jonathan Morgan tweeted out an image showing what appeared to look like, at least this is it's been a while since I reported on the story. I believe this to be the case. It was an image that claimed Russians were following Roy Moore. So his company was engaged in this. The report claimed they did a false flag. The New York Times obtained the report. And during this campaign, he tweeted about it. He tweeted that it was actually happening. Facebook banned him. They removed him and several others from the platform for this manipulation. This came up during Joe Rogan's podcast. It's unfortunate that this woman, in my opinion, she has no credibility. I absolutely think she should be interviewed on Joe's podcast. Admittedly, I didn't listen to the whole podcast, only a few key points that were highlighted to me. If they ended up talking about her role in this scheme, then good on them. But my understanding is that they didn't. However, I think it's very dangerous, in my opinion, to have these people who carry out these hoaxes. Look, if new knowledge is credible in any capacity, they shouldn't have been engaging in this fake news campaign. That's not my opinion. That's Mashable.com saying it was a fake news campaign, period. And it drew so much attention to a bunch of other people. They're embarrassed. And more importantly, Hoffman has joined Jones in calling for a federal investigation into the tactics. He has also committed to maintaining better oversight of organization he funds, as well as improving on how he vets future investments. Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn inadvertently, according to this, accidentally funded the fake news scheme. The Attorney General, as well as Hoffman, want a federal investigation into what these people are doing. Now, she did join the campaign after, I understand that, but at a certain point, she has to realize what the company she works for is accused of. The New York Times says they have the report, they've seen it, and they acknowledge engaging in these false flags. Her credibility, zero. Straight up zero. In fact, as I mentioned, they were banned, and on the podcast with Joe, Jack Dorsey mentioned that he sent the request to Vijaya, that's the trust and safety woman, and she said they banned the peripheral accounts. I would be willing to bet that Jonathan Morgan still has not been banned. You have to be it's absolutely interesting and fascinating. Please tell me how. You can have New Knowledge's chief executive, Jonathan Morgan, personally confirmed the agency weaponized fake news in the election between Jones and Moore. However, he claims his use of such tactics were on a small scale and denies involvement in the larger scheme described by the New York Times. Well, your company did it. You're involved. You were banned by Facebook. Why didn't Twitter ban you? So it is what it is. You can see that the Joe Rogan podcast is getting heavily thumbs down partly because of this. She is not someone who should be coming on and claiming these things because they have weaponized the information they're claiming exists. They also sell the product. This is a pitch, a marketing, like I do not trust this. And I got to call it out. It is what it is. You know, I messaged Joe about it. He said he would, he'd look into it. But there you go. I'll leave it at that. Extra video for the day. I'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m.